all of us are in the same boat. We're all human beings on this planet. We all have different jobs and different things going on in our lives, but we all connect. We all connect. There's always somebody in our family that's an issue or something's going on. We all have our own crosses to bear. I'm one of them. Have you ever been affected by the drug epidemic? I'm sure so many of you that are listening right now have either been affected by some type of addiction in your family, friends, yourself. It is a crisis across the United States of America, and it is tragic. I would say global crisis, but I'm focusing right now on our own country, where among Americans aged 12 years and older, there are 37,309,000 addicts. And that's on the low scale, guys, because that's just what we know from the National Center for Drug Abuse Statistics. And it's always under the actual numbers. And this was from 2020. And just last year, we suffered losses that are immeasurable when you think about it. Over 130,000 due to the opioid fentanyl epidemic in our nation, and fentanyl poisoning, which doesn't necessarily equate and doesn't equate at all, actually, with addiction. But people that thought they were taking a Percocet or an oxycodone or an Adderall and then just died. But it's the addiction that I want to talk to you about today. And I just want you to listen to these. And I have a very, very special guest, a mother whose son is suffering through addiction. And boy, does she have some amazing advice, guidelines, and hope for those of us. And yes, even in my own family, we are dealing with that. We are dealing with addiction. Finding ways of coping and living a different life than the one that you think you have to live when it comes to the addict. This is finding a way to save yourself. Yes. And being able to do what's best for the person in your family that is the addict. This is a disease, an epidemic, a choice, whatever you want to call it, but it's spreading across America. 13.5% of Americans 12 and older used drugs in the last month. And this, I'm going back, this is 2020. So these statistics have increased since then, or maybe they've weighed around the same, but they haven't gone down. I can tell you that. A 3.8% increase year over year. 59 million plus, or 21.4% of people 12 and older have used illegal drugs or misused prescription drugs within the last year. Think about that. 138 million plus people, or 50% of people in the United States age 12 and over, have illicitly used drugs in their lifetime. Usership among people age 12 and over is down, and this was 0.4% year over year. This statistic is also remarkable. 138 million Americans 12 and older drink alcohol. Over 28 million Americans, 20.4% of them, have an alcohol use disorder. 57 million people use tobacco or nicotine products in the United States. 24.7%, and this was in 2020, I know the number is much larger now, of those with drug disorders have an opioid disorder. This includes prescription pain relievers or painkillers and heroin. Has your family had an empty chair at the dinner table? Do you sometimes wonder where your child is and what you can do to help them? And if your help is only hindering them? I got to tell you, I have a woman on the show today that has been through all of that. You are not alone. I am not alone in this. Our families are not alone in this. And we should never be ashamed to actually say it, to say that we all share this common thread, right? There is an addiction crisis in our nation. And I have Marguerite Connelly on the show. She's an author, an expert because she's lived through it with her own children, and how she has handled addiction in her family. I cover the numbers on the show. But remember, each number is a person created in the image of God, and that is someone's baby girl or baby boy. And when I'm out on the streets, whether that's in Oakland or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Dayton, Ohio, or a small town in Tennessee or Kensington, Philadelphia, where people are basically walking around the streets like zombies, the first thing that goes through my mind is that these people were once children with hopes and dreams, families, with people that were in their life that had hopes for them. At least I hope so. With people that loved them. At least I hope so. And even if they didn't, they were children and they're human beings that deserve our love. And we can't ignore this crisis any longer because each and every one of us has somehow been affected. And each and every one of us could potentially be that person. You've got to remember that. It's the only way not to end up there is to believe that you could actually be that person. And that I wholeheartedly believe. Folks, Allegiance Gold, thank you so much for being a sponsor of the Sara Carter Show. Gold and silver allow you to protect what you've worked so hard for, and it gives you back the control and the privacy that you need. And because reputation is important to me, the only company I recommend is Allegiance Gold. And right now you'll get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Don't wait. Call or click today. That's 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, no H. Or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks. We already know that. That's why you've got to diversify. But we can prepare and we can protect our families. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, no H, or go to protectwithsara.com. Marguerite Connelly is here. She is the founder of a major building development company in New York and the author of Addicted to the Addicted, a mother's tale of going from heartbreak to hopeful. And I think there's a lot of moms out there, Marguerite, just like you. And even in my own family, we have a major issue with somebody we love very much who is addicted. And I mean, it feels like it's an epidemic in our nation.
It is an epidemic. My son is 32 years old. He has been suffering since he's 21. So at 21 years old, you think your child is, out of, that place where he can become an addict, They say the teens are the crucial years, but at 21, somebody gave him an opioid and it was all downhill from there. So there is definitely a crisis. And that's why I wrote Addicted to the Addicted, because I felt if I didn't start speaking up about it, then how do we pave the way for the next generation? How do we let our neighbors know that we have issues? And once I started speaking up and telling people, all I heard was my son, my daughter, my cousin, my mother, my father. And then people were more open up to it and they would speak about it, which was really, it was a good thing and a bad thing.
I know it's a bad thing, I guess, in the sense that we start to realize just how far and wide addiction is spread in our nation, and the mental health issues that come along with that, the lifetime of suffering, and also the victims and the families that are connected to the addicts. Just that it becomes such an overwhelming emotional and physical toll on everyone. And I could say that personally. I've seen that in my family, actually, not just in one case, but in several different cases, where I've had relatives that have had addiction issues. And it's gut-wrenching to watch somebody and to watch their life be destroyed by addiction. I mean, I think that's a gut-wrenching experience, right?
It's horrible. My mother was an addict. And I was thinking the other day, I'm 55 years old. And so it's like 50 years now that we still have the same issues. Nothing has gotten any better. And I don't understand how this could be, but it's very frightening to not know where your child is, to wonder if he's dead. I have friends of mine that their son went to a sober living house in Florida, and he died in a sober living house. They didn't call the parents. They threw him in the street on the curb, and the parents got a phone call. It's very ugly out there.
Oh, it's horrible. Tell us a little bit about your son Timothy, because Addicted to the Addicted, it's your story of what you came to terms with as a mother of an addict. And I think for all of you listening out there, I mean, the elephant in the room many times is right in front of us in our own homes, in our own, families. And it's so difficult for us to come to terms with that. It's hard to come to terms with the fact that somebody that you love, that you've given your whole life to, that you raised, that you played with, that you went to the park with, that you watched them play baseball and do all these amazing things, and you had all these hopes and dreams for them. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like, what's happening to this beautiful child of mine that is now this other person that is addicted to narcotics? And, I've done everything I can to save them. I mean, tell us a little bit about Timothy and what that was like, because you said it started at 21 for him. And I think that's a big eye opener for a lot of people.
So I want to be clear about something. I write about both of my children and Addicted to the Addicted. My daughter, Carrie Young, was addicted to opioids as well. She was dating the neighborhood drug dealer. I had no idea. He looked like the little German kid next door. And then, when you have a daughter, you think she's just PMSing, and, you don't realize she's on opioids. But she's 10 years clean now, ready to graduate nursing school, mom of 3 kids, happily married. And this is an amazing success story. But the difference between my son and my daughter is my daughter went for her recovery. She did not let me get involved. She knew what she had to do. She called her father's union. She made them pay for her rehabs or detoxes. So it was a big difference there. With Timothy, he just spiraled out of control, and he looked like death walking most of the time, And for me, I didn't know how to handle it. So you try everything. There was a point where I found him detoxing in his apartment, sick, vomiting, rocking like this. When people say they rock, they really do that. And I said, Timothy, and I was going to his house because he had just stole something from me, and they do. They steal because they don't want to get sick. And it was just ugly. His face was all broken out. His mouth was sunken in. And he's only about 5'7", and he looked like he was 90 pounds. And it's just like, one breath you want to take him and hug him and rock him. And the next breath you just want to, beat him and say, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? But
it's almost like they don't even see what they're doing to their own bodies. It's like they don't even see it. They can't even mentally come to terms with what they're doing to themselves, right? Because the addiction is so overwhelming.
I agree with you on that. I think that there's a part of them that may know, but the addiction is so overwhelming and so much more stronger that they don't really see that,
Right.
And that was how it was with Timothy. I mean, you're talking about someone that's overdosed many times. I'm glad I never saw that, but I do keep Narcan around. It's really scary. But another scary thing is when, like you said, the family of the person with the addiction, we forget about those people. And I said to someone the other day, I said, if we look at all the homeless addicts and we look at Skid Row and San Francisco and we look how many people are there, there's a lot. Does anybody say, wow, where are all these people's children with their grandparents that have no means, no money, and they're raising, they're 60, 70, some of them even 80, and they're raising their grandchildren. So addiction is so much more bigger than me looking at my son. It's about kids losing their parents and that whole domino effect that happens.
And how many generations are actually affected by that? And I know there's statistics now that are through the roof, and they're still trying to gather them, because just last year, and this is, I think, a minimal number for everyone out there that's listening, over 130,000 deaths associated with fentanyl and fentanyl poisoning, fentanyl and heroin addiction. That's more than what we lost in Iraq and Afghanistan together. And I think if we get other numbers and we see the numbers of deaths in the United States, I think people would be astonished at what that adds up to, and how much more deaths we're seeing. But you're right. Where do all their children go? And when I was in Ohio and I was covering this issue, there are foster homes or homes for the babies and children of addicts that need to be placed in a foster home. So there's like a pseudo kind of social services middle ground where they take the children from addicts or allow the addicts to spend time with their child there, but the child actually is placed into foster care and foster services or with family members. And it was astonishing how many children were actually lost in the system because of addiction.
I'm on Facebook and a lot of these platforms with grandparents and the grandparents that are going, I have these children, I don't have any money, I don't know what to do with them. Can someone send me canned food? Can someone send me diapers? And it's really very, very sad. Very sad.
How do you come to terms with, Marguerite, in your book, how do you come to terms, and in life, how did you come to terms with, okay, what is the best way for me as a mother to handle this? Because I think that is, and I'm a mother, we have 6 children between us, all with their own issues. But I think the hardest part as a parent is saying to myself, where do you let go? Where do you hold on? How do you do this? And what was like, can you lead us through your discovery? Like how you yourself found a way to navigate your son's addiction for yourself?
I've said this plenty of times. As a parent, I think everyone is going to have to go through what I went through, right? Because you'll cut off your arm for your kid, right? However, some people may get there a little sooner. For me, it was quite a long time. But first, I had to really come to terms with the fact that my son was ill. The generation that I grew up in, an addict was an addict. They were no good. They were nothing but junkies. So that was what my household taught me, and my mother was an addict. I didn't know because I was so abused that I was just about survival and trying to just stay alive from my stepfather. But moving forward, I remember when the first time I realized that my son was sick, I went to visit him in California and we met somewhere to eat. And he comes sitting in the restaurant and he comes in and he looks horrible. And I said to him, you look like shit. His face again sunk in. He just emaciated and he sat down and there was a tissue in front of him and he put his head down and I'm watching these tears hit a tissue. And he looked up at me and he said, I know I look like shit. He goes, but I don't want to hear it from my mom. I know I'm a piece of shit. And at that moment, it took my breath away. And I said to myself, how could I, as a human being, be so disconnected? I'm supposed to be the sane one here, sitting in front of this helpless addict who doesn't like his life, who doesn't want to live like this. So it was apparent to me that he was ill. And I said to myself, from now on, when we meet, we are not going to sit across and eat dinner. We're going bowling. We're going to the movies. We're going to the mall. We are going to do something that we're going to occupy our time so that we're just going to have fun. So that is the first time that I knew how sick my child was. Fast forward, it took a long time for me to say, well, It's all about dignity. Nobody wants to be told what to do, whether you're a drug addict or not. Who am I to say that Timothy lives his life, wrong or, just not normal? And I said, that's not my place. So I allowed him to do what he wanted to do. And I said to him one day, I said, Tim, look, if this is the life that you want to live and you want to do drugs, just be safe. Please, just be safe. And from there on, I started learning that, because the phone calls would come in and it would be, you MF, I'm going to kill you. You stole this. You did that. You just got out of jail. What's wrong with you? And I'd hang up the phone and I'd say, oh my God, what if he never calls me again? What if he's dead tomorrow? Can you do that? So I learned how to say, hey, Tim, how to protect myself. No credit cards being left out, nothing for him to be able to steal.
Right.
So I protected myself like that. And that's when my life became easier, when I stopped trying to run his life and took care of my life. And I said, I'm in this relationship. I'm married for so many years. And it's not Timothy's dad, but he was always good. He never said, I don't want that kid in his house. I don't want him around. He was very, very sweet. So I just always made sure, and I said to myself, when you're in a relationship or you're married, it is my responsibility to be the best that I could be for my husband. And if my child wants to live his life the way he does, let him live that. But I'm here and I'm in this relationship, so I have to be the best that I could be for Matt and me.
Right.
And that was what I held true to. It didn't mean that I stopped caring. It didn't mean that I did my sneaky little, hey, Tim, how are you? Or, my little ways of just letting him know that I was thinking about him and
Right.
to let me know he was alive.
I think that is such a very real and enlightening point, and it's not easy, but it's when you have to say, I can't control this person. Because I think like that whole idea of control is what drives us crazy, right? Because we are just beating ourselves up. Like, why isn't this child of mine even understanding where I'm coming from? That all I want is the best for them, that I love them, but then you're trying to control them and that they're not ready or they don't want it or they don't care, whatever that issue is. So actually letting go, do you think, I mean, I don't know if you're a spiritual person. I don't know. I mean, how do you, when you come to terms with that, how do you continue down that path and say, I mean, do you ever go through moments where you're just kind of like, I need to check up on him, or does it get easier as time goes on?
For me, it gets easier. I came to terms with the fact that everything comes back to self, right? If
Right.
my son should die, who am I? Who will I be? How could I live without him? I'll be lost. So it really comes back to self. Sometimes people may say, well, they're in a better place. And that may be so if they're suffering so much, right? But it was really, the control is really about self, because that would make me feel good. If my son needed money, here, take money, wasn't good for him, but it made me feel good, right? Because I was doing my
Right.
motherly duty. So it takes time. I did Al-Anon for a long time, and it helps 100%. It
What
really
about,
helps.
like, you talked about that. What about, drug addicts are, and alcoholics and, addicts are amazing manipulators, right? I mean, and I think like, you probably learned a lot about that at Al-Anon too. Just you feel like they can turn the tables on you. And the minute you're having a conversation with them, then all of a sudden, and I know this from experience. So I'm talking to you guys out there, all of you out there, all of us are in the same boat. We're all human beings on this planet. We all have different jobs and different things going on in our lives, but we all connect. We all connect. There's always somebody in our family that's an issue or something's going on. We all have our own crosses to bear. I'm one of them. And my husband always jokes around. He goes, but he's serious. He goes, you always feel guilty about everything. He's like, and that's why, everything's so hard on you. And I had to really learn to not feel bad about every little thing connected to somebody else. Is that your experience as a mom of an addict, like that it's easy to be maybe manipulated, or that you'd feel so bad? You're like, you know what? I feel like it's my fault. I'll give him something here and I'll help out there. And then
Well,
that becomes more of the enabling.
Well, that depends on how the situation is handled, right? And that's why I stopped yelling at my son. Because the minute I hung up the phone with him, I felt tremendous guilt. And I'd say, okay, here's $20 or here's $50. Because I felt guilty that we had that conversation. I mean, guilt is an emotion that there's really no use for, right?
Right.
So when going to Al-Anon was hard for me to understand in the beginning. And my sponsor used to say, because I want to complain about Tim, I want to complain about him, and she said, listen to me. I don't want to hear about you. I want to hear about you. What are you doing? And I'd say, oh, wait, it's about me, right? Because if I kept complaining about Tim and how he was ruining my life, because he wasn't ruining my life, I was ruining my life because I allowed his actions to take over my life, right?
Bingo.
Right, bingo. And that's why I had to take a step back and let him be me. Okay, what are we doing? We're in Al-Anon today. We're all going out for coffee today. Let's go out for coffee. You don't talk about, your son's addiction in Al-Anon, where a lot of people think you do. You talk about yourself, and, maybe there's some tidbits here on what to do if you feel like, you're losing that day, and there's these little passages, but it's really not about Tim. It's all about me.
Hey, folks, I love Mike Lindell. I love my pillow. Happy 20th anniversary, Mike. This is so great. And I love the fact that these are American products, right? I've got them in my house. I've got the sheets. I've got the dog beds. I've got the slippers, the My Slippers. I've got everything, the My Pillows, the My Pillow 2.0s. I'm so excited. The mattress toppers. Why? Because I love American products. And I love American companies and Mike Lindell as well. Queen size My Pillows, regular price $69.98, are now only $19.98. You can't beat that. And just $10 more. Listen to this, for a king size. Can't beat that as well. I want you to go to mypillow.com/Carter, promo code Carter. Go to mypillow.com/Carter and use promo code Carter to get the queen size My Pillow for only $19.98 during Mike's My Pillow 20th anniversary sale. Congrats again. Or call 1-800-685-7221. There you'll find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all My Pillow products, including the My Pillow slippers, pet bed, blankets, and more. Get the best night's sleep. mypillow.com/Carter and use promo code Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. mypillow.com/Carter, promo code Carter. If you think someone in your life needs to hear today's message of hope, please share this video and be sure to subscribe down below for more videos like this. I pray for every single one of you, and believe me, together I know we'll save lives, and I know we'll help people beat addiction. We're stronger than that. Thank you. What do you think's happening in our country, specifically, even in our world? But there's always been addiction, I think, since the beginning of mankind, since we first figured out the very first mind-altering narcotic or drug, but really we're seeing such an overwhelming addiction on so many different scales. Not just, we're seeing it, whether it's food or opioids or, pornography or what. There's this excessiveness that we're seeing in our society. Through your experience in talking to folks and other mothers and folks who are suffering from the same thing, what do you think's going on here?
You know what? I just can't figure it out, to be honest with you. And you're right, it's been around forever, but it's even more so now. And I just can't figure out how we can't cure addiction or alcoholism. It just seems so small to everything else. We're curing cancer, we're going to the moon, we're doing all this stuff. And I just wonder if, you look at places like Skid Row and you have all of these camps set up with homeless people that are drug addicts. And I said that if I set a tent up in my backyard and put my son in it and gave him some clean needles, tucked him in food, and I allowed the drug dealer to come back and forth and give him his drugs, I'd be in jail,
Right.
So how is it that the government gets away with doing this? And then I thought to myself, for me, I have an emotional connection. This is my child. I want to take care of him. That's my emotional connection. What is it that our government has this emotional attachment to that they need to keep people like that? And is that boats? I mean, I can't figure it out, but that's my thought. Like, what's their emotional need for these people to stay like this?
I got to tell you, that is absolutely the thoughts that run through my head, because when I walk through the streets, and I just got back from Oakland, the NAACP there asked for a state of emergency in the city of Oakland, the NAACP, because crime is so excessive that homicides have risen over 80%, homicides since 2019 to now, over 80%, over 40% with robberies and burglaries, carjackings, addiction rates are skyrocketing. You go to the streets, and I look at these children and young adults, like zombies on the sidewalk, people not being charged for committing crimes, business owners and moms and dads saying, how am I supposed to be able to do anything? How can I get my kid to school when they have to walk over about 25 addicts, just to get to the school bus? How do I protect my family from this? And that is exactly, Marguerite, what went through my head. How is the government to the point where even those that used to oppose the harsh hand of the law, like when it was too extreme, are saying now, whoa, wait a minute. There is something that is so bad happening here that we are watching this kind of virus spill across our community in such a way that we can't control it. We're losing our children. We're losing our businesses. We're losing our minds. We're losing our society.
If there's no repercussion to these actions and they're not going to change, I've always said that my son did his best in jail. And as some people will look at me in the beginning, of course I wanted leniency because I didn't know any better. Oh, he's on drugs, let him go. He'll report to court. He'll go into drug court. He'll do this. He didn't do any of it, and they didn't care. I begged his PO. I said, he's out of control. He's living in my basement apartment. Not that I lived there, but I rented out. He's upsetting his grandfather, his sister. He's on drugs. They didn't care. So he didn't care. When he was in Arizona, he was in prison, and his face was full. He was smiling. We FaceTimed like every day, and he was happy. And I said, you know what? He's out of his own way. He doesn't have to deal with the drug dealers in the street and his everyday worries. I think what they should need to do, though, is try to incorporate something like that with like the prison system, with a year in jail, getting some sort of certificates in addiction or becoming therapists or CASAC workers. And I think that's what should happen.
Yeah, I absolutely think you have a point there. Is there any organizations, and I know you and I talked about this before we actually got onto the podcast, but that you think, because this is the hardest part, like whether you're dealing with an alcoholic or a drug addict. I mean, I have friends who have recovering alcoholics who have now been like 15 years sober or 20 years sober, but it was very difficult for them. They had to do it for themselves, but to find the right place and be able to trust. How can we navigate these waters? It's so hard. Like, where do you send them to? They charge an arm and a leg, all of these places, and you want to be able to, if you need to get your child, especially if they're teenagers or something, into a rehab, is there an organization that can help you navigate those waters, or are we kind of just all on our own, swimming in a upstream in this massive ocean of insanity, you know, just trying to find a little island of respite. I don't know.
I think for me, my son was in over 30 something treatment centers. And
Wow.
it was 20,000, 30,000 at a pop. And in the beginning, you're kind of like, I have to save this guy. I can't use this as my kid. I have to do this. And a lot of them, he'd go in for 2 days, 3 days, and they'd kick him in the street. Um, and then finally, after, I don't know, so many, I said, this can't be legal. I would beg them, give me my money back. I need it. I have to put him into another treatment center. He signed a contract. I said, he's a drug addict, then it's my money. He doesn't know what he's doing. I went back and I started suing them. But even before it got into the court system, what would happen, Sarah, is they said, yeah, she's in New York. She's not going to come to California to take me to court. I learned that you could go online and you could start the process of suing someone. They couldn't give me my money back quick enough. So once that started happening, I said, well, if this is happening, what they're doing is illegal. How do you take all that money for a service that you didn't provide, you know?
Right.
So there was a lot of that. And then someone said to me once, he said, don't you know you don't spend money on a drug addict? And I was just like, what? It's my child. What do you mean? Of course you do. But what I was trying to say is there's going to be so much relapse. It doesn't happen 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. It's so ugly out there that a kid could come out of rehab for 30 days, 60 days, or 90, that they have these people called body brokers. And they will go up to a drug addict, someone strung out like Timothy, and say, hey, Tim, see that kid sitting on the curb? He's waiting for his parents to pick him up. Take this bag of dope, go over there and get him high. And I'll give you $100 or $200, or I'll give you as much dope you want. And the kid would relapse. And he would go back in the rehab. The rehab would get the money again. The rehab would give the body broker, you know, whatever his commission was for bringing this young boy back in. So there's so much of that that goes on too.
That makes sense because somebody that I know that that's very close to us was in a rehab, and one of the people in the rehab with them was an opioid addict, and eventually graduated to heroin, you know, and they were doing great for a little while in the rehab. And as soon as they ended up back on the street, and it was almost the exact situation that you just said, waiting for a family member to come get them, somebody offered them heroin and they died. So they didn't even make it to the hospital that time. They just died on the sidewalk within days after rehab. So this crisis that has swept across America, a lot of parents don't want to openly talk about it. They don't want to talk about people in their family that are sick. They're shamed for some reason. There's some kind of shame that goes with this of admitting that you have a child that is an addict. But this is not anything that we should be ashamed of. This is something that we should be speaking out against very loudly and clearly, right, Marguerite? I mean, am I wrong here? I mean, I think the shame is making it worse.
I'm sorry, 100% right that I had to come to terms with one day and say, you know, shame on me for not telling people about this. Shame on me, because if we don't talk about this, we don't pave the way for the next generation. I have grandchildren. I have a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 13-year-old. And I'm going, wait a minute. If we don't pave the way, my grandchildren could be the next victims to this, you know? So that's why I started talking about it. Matt and I were at dinner many times, and our friends across from us that didn't know my son had an addiction problem would say, see, such and such kid has cancer. What about all those drug addicts? The drug addicts should drop dead. And, you know, Matt would look at me and I'd look at him, and I really didn't have my bearings with these people at the time. But hey, when it came time and I felt comfortable enough, I let them all know, no, this is a problem. And that's when they would say, my son, my cousin, my this, my that. Mm-hmm.
So they were hiding. I mean, they were not hiding necessarily, but they weren't sharing that information either. In a way, it was keeping it close to the family. Like, oh, we're not going to air our dirty laundry. We don't want people to know, We don't. And that's why I say, for all of you out there, the only reason I'm not mentioning the exact person in my family right now is because I haven't been able to talk to them to get it to be public, but it's heartbreaking. It's gut wrenching. And because, I have this podcast all the time. I'm more of a public figure. It's harder on them, but I tell you, I am right there, with you when it comes to, watching somebody just deteriorate, and it's not easy. But I want you all out there, and I think, Marguerite, you want everybody to know too, that you're not the only ones. You're not alone. We're all here together. We can, and we can't hide it. I think hiding it, like I said just a moment ago, hiding that kind of pain and that addiction, it makes it worse. It makes it worse.
Yeah, and their children are not the only ones deteriorating. I was deteriorating as well. And
right.
I had said, and I think this is at the end of my book, that I will not lose one more family member to addiction. And that includes myself. Whether or not I'm using or I'm not using, I'm still losing myself to the battle of addiction. So addiction is not going to win over me. I'm going to take care of me. And that's really what I came to terms with.
Well, I'm telling you this, your book is going to be in the hands, not only in my hands and in my immediate family members' hands, as a guide on how to deal with this. And I hope you come back on the show and we go through, the various chapters and skill sets, and we talk about organizations. I'd like to bring you on more and more. But oh, absolutely.
I look forward to it.
Oh yeah. And I'm so excited to really get to know you and to have you be a part of this show. I think that's so important. Remember, folks, it's Addicted to the Addicted, a mother's tale of going from heartbreak to hopeful. And where can they get your book, and where can they go to get, is there a specific website or something where people can go to get the help that they need now if they are facing this in their own families?
So you could get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but I have Addicted to the Addicted website, and I have personal, which is www.margueriteconnelly.com. So feel free to reach out. I can help in any way I will.
Absolutely. Remember that, guys, you can go, and it's addictedtotheaddicted.com. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Addictedtotheaddicted.com for any help, or the personal website, MargueriteConnelly.com, correct?
Correct, yes.
And you get the book and this is what we're here about. This is what this podcast is about. It's about helping one another, trying to find a way to work together to get better. So you can please go to those websites, get her book, order it on Amazon, Addicted to the Addicted, a mother's tale of going from heartbreak to hopeful. Because just like you said, Marguerite, we have to take care of ourselves. Our families need us, right? And if we don't take care of ourselves first, we can't help anybody else the way we need to.
That's right. Correct.
Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Sara.
Anytime. Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining me today. Every once in a while, we need to, take a sobering look, so to speak, at our lives and really put into perspective what's important. Our families are the most important. Our children are the most important. We need to warn them every single day to say no, to not move in the direction of, falling into these traps where they become addicts. Look at Marguerite Connelly. Her son was 21 years old when he became an addict. Nobody is immune, right? Nobody is immune. And when you're out there on the streets, it doesn't mean you give money to people that are panhandling or drug addicts, but remember to pray for them. Each and every one of the people that are out there on the streets was somebody's child at one point in their life. They were a little baby. They were a child looking for some hope, some love, some compassion. Let's give that to them now, and let's just respect one another, and let's find a way together to resolve this crisis for our nation. If you love today's show and you want even more of the Sara Carter Show, make sure you rate this podcast 5 stars and subscribe on your favorite podcast app, whether that's Spotify, whether that is Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless all of the people in the world that need help, that need to be lifted up. May they be lifted up. May their addictions be healed. May they find peace in their hearts and love. God bless our great nation, and God bless the great state of Texas.